So we're exploring some Wargaming Tactica 101. New players to the channel, regardless of what your system is, being able to look at these key markers. There are certain things, Battletech, Chain of Command, God Tier, X-Wing Miniatures, games that I enjoy playing and regularly play. Yes, they have their own narrative. Yes, they have their own rules. Some of them even have their own dice. But there's like 15 or 20 Tactica 101, just general wargaming stuff that is going on that if you can see and you can be aware of, it's going to help increase that win, regardless of the system. And I've been pushing up some of those tactics to the playlist here on my channel. That's under Wargaming Tactics. So you can kind of go through and see them. There's 5 intro videos that'll kind of jump into the rest. We're going to talk about threat bubbles. Threat bubbles, how to recognize them and how to utilize them. Because the last thing you want to do is get caught by surprise, and you want to maximize your threat bubbles and de-escalate, or I should say minimize your opponent's threat bubbles. Okay, I'm going to be talking about Battletech. If you're not familiar with Battletech, think about this and how it relates to your wargaming system. Because again, while this is independent, we have to kind of start somewhere. I have a mech. Battletech is played on a hex map. And I have a mech, which is a giant war robot. It moves forward. When it's in the shooting phase, you have different ranges of weapons. And the range of these weapons could be 6 hexes, could be 9, could be 15. Based on the facing of the mech and how it can turn in the shooting phase with a torso twist or before this shooting phase based on its movement, it creates a visual bubble on the table. So if I look at my weapons and I say, I've got these lasers, I've got these weapons that can shoot 20 hexes out, then I literally, from the model, count 20 hexes out and then draw a radius around it. This is literally the threat bubble. This is true for any unit. What is the range of the weapons in hexes, in squares, in inches? Count it out, draw a 360-degree radius. This bubble, in theory, anything that comes into this bubble, you can shoot, unless it's blocked by terrain or it has some sort of way to prevent that. But essentially, you can threaten a unit based on that. Now, the threat bubble increases or decreases because maybe it's a shorter ranged weapon. Maybe I've got really short range lasers on this war machine, on this mech, and it's only 6 hexes out. So where the machine is, I draw 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I do the bubble. Let's talk about overlapping. You want to keep your units close together with similar range bands or attack bands. So now let's say I have 2 mechs and they're side by side 2 or 3 hexes over. If they have the same type of weapon, if I count out 15 hexes, draw that threat bubble of the first mech, draw that second bubble around the second mech, you'll see that they overlap. This now means anything that comes, any opposing units that come into that threat bubble, I can hit with twice the amount of weapons. I want to look at my units. And again, we're just talking Battletech right now. If you're familiar with it or if you're not, hopefully I'm describing this, you can visually see it. And of course, map this to your wargaming system. You want to look at the weapons profiles, whether they're lasers or catapults or some sort of magic, fireballs, whatever it's going to be in your system. And you want to have the units that have similar threat bubble ranges together. In this example of Battletech, if I have 2 mechs side by side and one can challenge 15 hexes out and the other one can only challenge 6, that means if something moves into the threat band, yes, I'm going to be able to hit it with one unit, but not the second. Ideally, I want to have this overlap because it's more dice than I can roll, right? If I only have 1 shot to hit you, maybe I hit you, maybe I don't. If the odds are really good, I probably will hit you, but it's still only 1 shot. If I can overlap 4, 5, or 6, I can just tag everything on that unit. So we want to try and coordinate that. We want to try and push that. Now, in calculating threat bubbles, it's also the movement of the unit. The movement of the unit. Can it move? How can it move? And what's its position? So jumping to chain of command oh no, we got to stick with BattleTech, right? Let's stick with BattleTech here. If I have artillery on the table, that artillery or a fixed field gun in the back, that threat bubble is static, meaning I have incredible range. I'm going to have the whole hex map, the whole table, or maybe only half if it's a smaller, it's a thumper artillery piece. Maybe I'll have 20 hexes. From that perspective, the calculation is always static. It's always going to stay that way. When we calculate threat bubbles for opposing units and our units, what is the ability to move ahead of time? In BattleTech, we have hover units. This is the 1980s. BattleTech came out in the 80s when I guess we were convinced warfare was going to drop from tanks to hover units everywhere. So you think there's a lot of hover units in Ogre. There's tons and tons in BattleTech, and some of them have the firepower of very, very powerful tanks, and others are just like, here's a laser, and we're going to put a lawn chair and a lawnmower engine on the back and just inflate a balloon. Really, it's just a laser delivery system. But these hover units are very, very, very fast. They can move 10, 12, 15 hexes. There are air units in BattleTech that can move 10, 15, 20 hexes. So if you see a piece on the other side of the table and you're calculating potential threats and you're calculating potential threat bubbles, from this perspective, you have to look at the movement. And that actually is the true projection of the threat bubble. You're out of range, but I move that unit up. I move that hover unit up very, very far, very fast. And then I've got a bunch of long-range missiles on it. You might be on the other side of the table, but I move up to the middle of the table, and then I have range. I push the threat bubble out to your unit. I say this just so you're not taken by surprise, so you're aware. And based on what the opponent does, sometimes you can catch people unaware based on threat bubbles because it looks like it's safe. If I have a fast unit, you look like you're pretty safe, when in truth, the movement can take you up there. So look at those projections. Try to map your threat bubbles with the same weapons profiles. Definitely try to overlap them. And think about in the movement phase of your game, whenever that phase is or however you move, how can you push out? How can you pull away? How can your opponent push out? How can your opponent pull away? This will give you, and of course, terrain might modify it, elevation might modify it, night fight or special rules might modify it. We're going to push that aside because I don't know the exact rule set you're looking at. But these threat bubbles are important because when it comes down to the phase where you are going to be attacking your opponent, whether it's in shooting or magic phase, whatever it's going to be, this is going to determine the volume of dice that you generate. The more dice you generate, roll to hit, roll to damage, roll to see what happens, roll for location. You want to roll the most dice possible. So being able to manage and understand threat bubbles will build you and allow you to have the biggest dice pool.